Alright, hello and welcome everyone. So I just want to start out with this video saying that this video was intentionally started off as something that was gonna be perks I'm not really like quite sold on yet. Like I wasn't super sold on Deadlock and No Way Out and Floods of Rage somewhat. I know it's a pretty good Scourge Hook perk, but I wasn't like convinced it was the best perk in the world. The only perk that I brought that I wasn't like, or rather that I knew was pretty good on Plague especially, is Discordance. So, you know, we went mostly perks that I wasn't really, you know, completely sold on, and one that wasn't. But anyway, honestly, this builds up until these couple games here, I did pretty well with, honestly. But I think that was more a testament to how strong Plague is rather than the build itself, because as you're about to find out, it does not help me in the least in these two games. And it's why I decided that I don't think Deadlock is good at all. I think it's a scam. If someone tells you to run Deadlock, I think you shouldn't. Like, I don't think it works very well with any regression perks because it will actively block a generator that you would want to be regressed, right? So it doesn't play well with any of those perks. It's really only good to slow the game down a little bit, for 30 seconds. That's not a lot of time. That is the equivalent of getting a really good chase and downing a survivor in that time. But that's not going to be happening a lot of the time with most people, I think, will have trouble doing a chase or getting a chase done in 30 seconds. It typically takes, at least me, typically will take about a minute. So Deadlock doesn't really buy you like a ton of time, as you'll see in these games. You'll see though, that if you haven't already noticed, that these survivors haven't done a single gen yet, and it's been like over 2 minutes now. And we already have our hook, our first hook, so it's like, it's really good. We're looking really good here, right? that's at least what I thought. And yeah, it just doesn't really pan out, you know? And honestly, I think the biggest reason behind their success in these games is that they're running anti-aura perks. See, I didn't notice this at first. Michaela's definitely running Distortion because as soon as we were able, or we would have been able to see her aura, we couldn't, and also her scratch marks disappeared. That's just an additional thing that Distortion does now, which is pretty good, but I didn't notice it at the time. But I had a feeling that since I couldn't see anybody's auras except like one person, I was like, okay, they're all running Distortion or something. Which is, it's just typical, right? You bring an aura reading perk and the matchmaker decides that you're gonna go up against a full team of Distortion users. Because like, honestly, who runs Distortion on Survivor? Nobody does. You just don't see it. Especially not a whole team using it. And normally I would assume it's off the record, but no, it was full-on Distortion teams. Just a bunch of people using Distortion. And honestly, the fact that these people don't really do well in chase, every time I do end up finding them and getting to a chase with them, they don't seem to hold up too well. Which is kind of a testament to how well you can actually do in this game, depending on like a multitude of factors, right? Like a good map can make a bad player seem really good, or certain perks can just, or certain strategies, I should say, like kind of stealth threat gaming, it's actually pretty viable. Like if the killer can't find anybody and is getting like one down every like 2 minutes, like you're in a good spot, I think. Like as long as you keep pressuring gens, like it's a totally viable strategy. But of course, you know, the stealth strategy doesn't always work. It's not always conducive to every map. But especially indoor maps or very large maps, then, you know, it works a bit better. Like you're able to hide a little bit easier. And I think that's kind of a testament to how you can play this game, right? Like how different strategies can work. I think the only reason we actually found Claudette there is because she was coughing. If she wasn't infected, I would have had no idea that she was around. Absolutely none. But yeah, I think it's a neat way to have this game set up, right? I don't think a lot of games can do that, where you can approach a objective in a multitude of different ways. there are games like that, and don't get me wrong, they're very good games. But I think this is probably like the first multiplayer game I've played where a certain strategy could just work very effectively for you, while not, you know, being the typical main way to actually, you know, complete the objective. Just sneaking around the entire map. If everyone's on board with sneaking around the entire map and doing gens, then and running away at the first sign of danger, you know, it's like, I mean, what can the killer realistically do? So, well, realistically, I should commit to a chase, but I don't, as you see, and that actually ends up costing me the game. I had it in my mind, I think, that Deadlock was going to do more for me. It really never did, though. Deadlock really just kind of supports stealth gaming, right? Like, any gen that they happen to be working on that gets blocked off by Deadlock, they just go like, okay, well, I'll hide somewhere until it's unblocked. And then the killer gets like no value from it, and it's just like, okay, well. So anyway, Deadlock's a scam, don't use it. Like I mentioned before, I don't think it really has any good perk synergy, especially with the perks that you would want to run, like maybe Pop Goes the Weasel, or even Pain Res, I think is very good with it. It's just, I don't know, it's just like such an awkward perk for me. I can't really wrap my head around it. If people make it work, I honestly would love to know how. Because in this game, I had originally, well, after this game, I should say, I originally was thinking that maybe it's because I don't have any regression. It's just Deadlock. It's a little bit of slowdown, which isn't really enough. So in the next game, I put on Overcharge instead of No Way Out, which was also a mistake, I should say, because trying to make Deadlock work is not the way. Because honestly, after playing with No Way Out for a little while, I do think it's actually good. It's not bad. It encourages a playstyle that I kind of vibe with. You know, not trying to tunnel one person out of the game and winning that way. Instead of, you know, it's one of those perks that encourages you to, you know, hook at least everybody, right? Because the more you hook other people, the more value you get from it, which is good, which I think is encouraged, which is why I really like the change they made to Pain Res, and, you know, encourages you to hook everybody. Because if you don't, then you don't get to use all your tokens. Speaking of which, I think Pain Res is a pretty good perk. I think more people should run it if they're not really convinced that it's good. In fact, I think it's probably better than it's ever been, because now it's like, the fact that you can get like a 100% generated regression after using all 4 tokens of it is insane. Like, I wasn't really sold on it when I first heard about the changes they were making to it, but it's actually really good. Like, say you're not, like, it's 100% regression across like a multitude of different generators, right? But that's still like 25% progress that they're losing every time it goes off, which is really good. That's like old Pop used to be like. And you can see why they changed that, because, yeah, it's very strong. And apparently they're buffing Pop Goes the Weasel a little bit. They're giving an extra 10% of what it normally does, which I think is pretty cool. I don't know if that's too strong. It doesn't feel like it's very strong right now. It feels very good to use, but it doesn't feel incredibly overwhelming. So I guess if that goes through, I'll get to play with that a little bit and see how that is. Anyway, I'm excited for that. But yeah, I just felt these games are kind of like a good demonstration of like how I kind of go through making builds for killers and whatnot. Or at least killers that I like. I'll devote time to figuring out like what works well with them, what doesn't, and a lot of the time it's pretty miss. It's rarely get the hits, but mostly miss. I don't think it's okay. That's not like, if you want to figure out something for a killer that you like, you should kind of expect to, or I guess you should be like more okay to lose games that, you know, because you're experimenting, right? If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You know, now you know, and you can move on to a different perk or try a different build. Or you could just run the meta build that everyone else runs, which is fine. I'm not gonna be like, not gonna get on your case for that. But I think behavior is trying to move in a direction where perks aren't really that good by themselves anymore. I think Pain Res is probably the exception here, where it's just very good by itself. You don't really need to do anything to it. at least to make it better. It's very good on its own. But I think they've decided to like, at least it feels like that's what they're doing. Because a lot of perks just don't really seem to work well by themselves anymore. And I think if there are perks out there that still do that, I think they're looking at it. They're trying to see what they can do with it. And yes, like, yeah, just 2 distortions and off the record. It's basically anti-aura for the whole team. But yeah, I think that kind of philosophy, at least when you're approaching a perk system game, is really healthy for the game. Honestly, it encourages a lot of variety rather than everyone running the same exact thing all the time. Because I think a lot of people at one point with this game were just feeling like it was really stale because everyone always ran the same 4 perks on Survivor and Killer, and it never changed no matter what. And it was really something. I think it was like last year they made like they did the big perk overhaul, so that it like definitely really shook up the meta. And I think that's what people were really waiting for, because it was just not. I think it was getting pretty stale for a lot of people. Myself, a little bit bored as well. But yeah, no, it was a really good change, and I'm glad that they're actually trying to shift their focus in that direction. As you see, like, he doesn't see that palette there, so I think the survivors in these games not incredibly great at chase. Like, if I commit to them, which I have this problem in this game too. Commit to your chases, folks. Unless it's really bad for you. But yeah, I don't know. I was so non-committal to a lot of these chases in both games. I think that's really what the problem was. But, you know, also Deadlock sucks, so, you know, that wasn't helping at all. But yeah, anyway, perks. They're doing good. I'm looking forward to what the developers are doing these days. Especially with the new killer. I'm very interested in the singularity. That's going to be definitely a killer I want to have. Not like the Skull Merchant, which I'm like, there's like 1 perk on her that I'm somewhat interested in. I think it's called Thwack. Whichever one is the one that lets you see a survivor's aura when you break something. Which I think is cool, but that was like the only perk on her that I was like interested in, and I didn't think the power was super neat either. I'm being honest, just seemed kind of like a letdown on that killer. But the singularity though, he looks really cool. His power looks really neat. His perks seem really good, for fun at least. So yeah, looking forward to that. Anyway, yeah, you can see now in this game I swapped No Way Out for Overcharge. So now when I hit gens, it feels like maybe I'm doing something, but yeah, I don't think Overcharge is very good. I don't think it's worth running anymore, like at all. I used to kind of be down on it back before it got nerfed, but now it's not even worth running it now. The regression is just too slow on the startup, and then, oh yeah, I see that. See Deadlock preventing me from taking that gen, so that feels extra bad. See, that's what I mean though, but that Deadlock doesn't really work well with regression perks. It blocks off any generator that you would want to actually have regressing, so it kind of fucks you over that way. But yeah, like I said though, it's like a learning process. You see what perks work and which ones don't. And for me personally, I just decided that I'm just going to cut out Deadlock completely. It's not worth trying to make work for me, because if it works for you, I don't know what to tell you. It doesn't work for me, it doesn't work for my playstyle. It just does not seem very good to me at all. But yeah, I cut that out, and I cut the Overcharge out. I think after this game is what made me really just like overhaul this build. At least half of it. I kept Floods of Rage and I switched over to Pain Res because yeah, I'm convinced Pain Res is just the best regression perk right now. And I put on Brutal Strength because I am too old to deal with like 80 pallets on a map, but behavior keeps insisting on putting 80 pallets in a map, so that's just how it is. That being said though, I will maintain that Brutal Strength and Bamboozle probably be some of the best perks to run on like M1 killers. So if you're not running those, at least one of those, I think you ought to throw it on, see how it does for you. And since, you know, half the time I'm playing Plague as an M1 killer, it does feel like a necessary requirement to have on her. That's just my personal opinion. You probably don't need to, but it just feels a lot better to have at least one of those perks on her. So that way your chase potential doesn't really go down if you don't have your power. or it doesn't go down so significantly. Especially on certain maps like the Borgo, which has like a safe palette like at every loop, and Area of Crows, which I think is disabled right now, but still, when that comes back up, all those palettes are incredibly safe. So it's like, yeah, I think right now Brutal Strength's probably a little bit better than Bamboozle if I had to really choose. But then you have maps like Haddonfield and Garden of Joy where Bamboozle would probably be better, but that's beside the point. I'm not even doing that. That's for a later video. Or hell, even a previous video. I think that my strongest builds video, I think I had Bamboozle and Brutal Strength, and you know what? I'll stick by it. I think that's incredibly strong in Plague if you have all their really good add-ons as well. I think you might as well. You don't really need a lot of like the really aggressively strong regression perks on Plague if you have her best add-ons. You just need to like increase her chase potential and downing potential, and then yeah, you don't really need that much. But yeah, if you're not using Plague's strongest perks or add-ons, then of course, yeah, you don't really need those perks. Or what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that you probably want something a little stronger on your build. Because if you're not relying on the really strong add-ons, then, you know, you need something else strong to help you out. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, strong add-ons are always going to win you games. Of course not. You know, it's still a skill-based game, at least most of the time. So you still have to be good at the game, you know? And, you know, not every Survivor team you go up against is going to be amazing. But, you know, every now and again you're going to run into a team that makes you want to be like, well, I'm going to slap on every strong thing that I have and play like that for the rest of the game. Or for the rest of my session, I guess. I think I sprayed him there. I didn't realize I was out of my red juice power, which is funny. But yeah, if you approach all your builds like that, where they're like, just always run the strongest things, I feel like you take away a lot of the fun that you can have with this game. Like, the games become kind of one-sided a lot of the time. Sure, you'll run up against a team of survivors that are really good, and will make you sweat a bit. But I think more often than not, at least in my experience, like a lot of the survivors I go up against, they're not typically the best survivors in the world. It's usually the solo queue people that aren't like communicating with each other or nothing, so they just hopped on Survivor to have fun, which is fine. I like that. I think that should be encouraged, which is also why I encourage people to not play the strongest things all the time, because like I said, or at least like I've said in previous videos, at least once or twice, I like games that have a bit of back and forth, right? I like games to be a little closer than not. I think everyone enjoys a game that's like close or keeps them on the edge of their seat. It's exciting, you know, you don't know if you're gonna win or lose. And I think when you run the strongest things, it kind of takes away from that, right? You're gonna find yourself having less and less of those games, as long as you keep running like the strongest things that you can have on Survivor or Killer. Which is kind of why I also like solo queue Survivor, is because you never really know. You can bring the strongest things on Survivor, and if you're playing solo queue, you are so far from guaranteed to getting out that it's actually it's I don't know, it's like a lot of RNG added to it, which I like, as opposed to like full-on Survivor with friend teams where they can like communicate everything, and if they're like being really strategic about everything they do, then, you know, it takes a bit of the fun out of it. But I understand if you want to do that. That's, of course, is fine to play with your friends. I'm not saying you shouldn't. Of course, that's like saying, you know, you shouldn't have friends. Of course, you should always have friends to play with, because yeah, any game's enjoyment can be maximized with a friend playing with you. I mean, look at Resident Evil 5, like one of the worst Resident Evil games in existence, but it's fun if you have a friend to play with. But yeah, that's really gonna do it for me today. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me ramble on, and if not, well, I'm deeply sorry. But in any case, if you did like the video and you want to see more videos like this from the future, then go ahead and like, subscribe, and do all that stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.